Welcome to another episode of Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Doc. We're celebrating the new release from THEYSELF, 1500.
Yes. Yeah.
1500. So, half a decade ago, the first THEYSELF record was recorded in a hotel room.
Yes.
Using a pair of headphones as a makeshift microphone.
Yes.
And then this record that we're about to dive into now was recorded in your touring van.
Yeah, which happens to be it's just a Ram van, Dodge Ram, but the 1500 is like the model.
Yeah. So then the record bears the name of the car.
That's actually where Wolf Tower comes from too, because the hotel room that we stayed in was connected to a casino, and there's like, I don't know, Wolf Tower was like a series of like stacks of rooms, I guess. And it's just like it's like, oh, okay. And that's also where Roost came from, because that was just recorded in this alt performance space called the Aux Roost,
which I wasn't
just like,
familiar with.
Yeah, so it's just like it kind of came from
at which you were living
at the time. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, at the time, and so the 1500 name just kind of came from. Well, I mean, that's where it was recorded, and it's just like kind of a theme with the last couple releases of just like, yeah, why don't we stay the course here?
So what is the significance then of the focus on place and location and documenting and foregrounding the location in each case?
I think it's because in previous bands and previous works before I started doing this project, a lot of it became kind of focused on this chasing stuff that wasn't real, chasing these dragons that don't actually exist. So you get a little hype as a band, and then you get a little self-esteem, and it's fun, but then you start, I think, planning your art around staying in a certain spot.
Interesting.
And
even though a previous band name is a place
that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
It's named after a spot that doesn't exist.
Fairfax.
So I think a lot of times in Fairfax there was like a lot of self-imposed pressure to just kind of, well, how do we keep the. It's like, well, that thing seemed to got a lot of attention, more attention than we were expecting. Well, now we have to get the same amount of attention.
How do we manufacture that again?
Yeah, and I think a lot of bands get there as well. So I think this was like meant to be this permanent side project in a weird way. This project of just like, hey, why don't we do the opposite of everything you've been doing and just kind of focus on making it being the art, not making it being like this weird, like, oh, we're gonna make it, this thing's gonna make it. And it's just like, no, this thing just makes actual things. And just, use it as a vehicle to try all those like weird ideas that wouldn't work in your old bands. It's like, what if we just like went out into the woods and recorded an album outside? And it's like, or we could, use electricity and indoor plumbing. I don't know why we have to make it harder. Like, recording anything is hard enough. So like, I think it just became this vehicle for that.
No pun intended.
I think that was like, it's not, oh, everything needs to be done in a place. I think it was just more of chasing the butterflies. Like, if it's giving you the butterflies, keep going there.
Or returning to the butterfly.
Yeah, or it's like we were talking about. I think when you were on my show, we were talking about the artist way, and it's like chasing that good orderly direction. That concept of just like, oh yeah, like wait, we're creating, we're like firing all cylinders and just kind of creating. And I think it always just kind of led me there, because the idea behind this project was just like, all right, I don't want to care about notoriety or press, or just like, I just need something to like just like work on your inner child and just create. And the second I created this project, it got nominated for Best New Band, and I didn't know what to do. And like even my friends, they were like, "Hey, congrats on that thing." And it's like, I don't want to talk about that. Like I would be like really weird about it because like it was like my worst nightmare of just like, no, this was because
you wanted it to be the side project where you just did what you did, nurse
actually
the inner child.
just make the stuff, just make the thing, and like make it a creative vehicle where. And I think all art is this way, but I think I wanted this project specifically to be a sustainable way to manage 3 people. One being your inner child. One being your inner child. The other being the person you are now and kind of managing like, well, am I still having fun with this? And if the answer is yes, we're like, okay, well, what do I want to do? How do I want to keep going? And then you kind of have those conversations with your inner child where it's like, oh, we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this. And it's just like, okay. And then there is the third person, which is the person you had to become to survive. The craziness that is reality, the world, or the circumstances we're all dealt, you know, like the things out of our control that like you just kind of have to do some things to make sure the lights stay on. And so like every time, I think in previous bands, like I would let the inner child run amok, and then that's unsustainable and we would like kind of burn out. And then because of that, you let the person who's in survival mode kind of run the ship a little too much.
Right, they end up
and then you become in this position where your present self is just like, well, wait a minute, this isn't working. I'm not having any. So you kind of have to have this constant negotiation with
communication
these 3
between
people.
Different parts of oneself.
Yes, and sometimes this negotiation is a knife fight, and other times it is a very respectful conversation. But I think with this project, a lot of it focused on, well, just do your best with what you have right now. And I think a lot of the times, being a completely DIY artist who, it's not just their passion project, it's also like their profession. And like I do actually pay rent doing this, so you kind of do have to give that person in survival mode a platform a lot of times, because they are right. But you also have to do that, you know, mental health check-in, and like at present, you know, it's like, hey, if we keep going, I'm gonna get sick, or if we keep going, I'm gonna, you know, my body's gonna shut down. But you also like need to nurture that inner child and be like, well, wait, is this even fun anymore? Because once you lose that, that's like the pilot light. So I think every project just kind of became this negotiation of like, all right, am I having fun currently? Yes. Okay, well, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Well, I think I want to make another record. And it's just like, well, what do I want to do? I don't know yet. And then the inner child is just like, we're going to get a horn section. No, a string section. No, both. And then we're going to do, you know, it's like, and then eventually the survival mode person has to be like, oh, okay, yes, I love your ideas of a recording studio in Nashville, but do you have Nashville money? Because I'm looking at your bank account, and I know you do not have Nashville money. So love you to pieces, love these ideas, but, you know, how are we going to do this? And then it's just always this constant...
Sounds like there's good communication between these different aspects
so
of
like
yourself.
that's kind of what this project is, of just like, I want to nurture all these crazy ideas, and I want to keep nurturing this creative side of me, like, and outside of all the other creative things that I do, just kind of have this to kind of return to as like a little clubhouse. But also kind of, you know, be honest with myself. And it's like, well, what's really sustainable? You know, it's just like, do you have, you know, the survival mode person comes in, and it's just like, you don't have Nashville money. And it's not like we can record an album in our van, and then like the inner child goes like, well, wait a minute, why not? And then present self goes like, actually, yeah, wait, why not? And then, you know, survival mode kind of looks at the numbers and goes, actually, let's give this a shot. You know, so it's usually...
It's good to have that part on board.
Once all those people are on the same page, it's kind of like that eureka moment, and this project, you interviewed me at the kind of genesis of it, and we were kind of talking about. Like,
was that when you came over to my old apartment?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was, and just kind of talking about like I was giving myself this project, broad permission to fail. Because I started it on a song a week project where it's like, instead of releasing it as a commercial product, it was just like, no, this is going to be a stage experience, and maybe like a little self-deprecation to kind of like soften the blow of just like, I don't know if any of this stuff is going to work, but also just kind of reminding yourself, it's like, you are going to bomb, and it's going to be on stage, and it's going to be in front of people, and it was almost like immersion therapy of just like after like trying to keep all these projects together, and you're always kind of like teetering on the edge of just like, oh, if this album doesn't make enough money, we'll be able to make another one, and if we don't play enough shows, are we going to be asked to play another one? If we don't do, if enough people don't come to the show, are we like, there's always like this thing, and trying to get away from that mindset with this project of just like, no, just do what makes you happy.
One of the songs on the record is evocatively titled "Do Make Think."
Yes,
and I'm thinking of that title and that song as you're talking. Could you expand a little bit on the significance of that song a week songwriting challenge? I've also had experience of
because I'm thinking about like in a way in the height of the pandemic. Those when I went live, that was kind of like a callback to.
What does it mean when you went live?
So I would go on my social media and do a live performance of a song
that you'd written that week.
Yeah, either I had written or it was something that would, like it was just like a little micro performance, because like it was during the height of like no one's going anywhere.
Right. This is what this week has yielded.
Right. Like it could be this improvisation or a new song I was working on, or it could be just like a new thing every week. And I kind of was doing that as a callback to that experiment of just like, well, this is kind of what this project was always here for. You know, like it's kind of, it's a play on pronouns, but it's also kind of a play on that collective unconscious of just like, there's that something we're all experience, but like there's also that like something we're trying to show, that collective experience, and like it's like are they selves, our like our role in the collective unconscious.
There's so much more than what we perceive.
Yes,
is a lyric and Do Make Think.
Yes,
and there's a lot of reminders, or there's a lot of encouragement, I think, in these songs to allow oneself to be with one's experience.
I had a collection of songs. Well, I always kind of have a collection of songs. It's like a storage unit where it's like I don't even know what's in there anymore. Like it was like, oh yeah, I guess I was working on that. So, but like because it was in the van, and that kind of came from, it's like, well, touring during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time in the van, so I would do these arrangements. It's like, is this even working? And just go direct, kick drum, guitar, and then just kind of listen back, and then you'd go home and try to make demos, and you're having that negotiation with those three people again. It's like, what's this going to be? I don't know. I want this. And we're like, well, can you afford that? Why don't you get a plugin? Who's going to afford that plugin? It's just like, and it just more and more of it. You would listen. Then this is kind of how Roost came about, of just like, oh, I should do something. I should put something out. And then I found this collection of performances that was just like, well, it's a little lo-fi, but there's something there. And it's similar to the first record of just like, well, it's a little weird and messed up, but at the time, like I was like feeling that same pressure I was feeling to create in other bands, and I was like, you know what? Why don't I just lean into anxiety? What if I could make my least favorite feeling danceable? What if I just kind of lean into that and
a panic attack you can dance to.
Exactly. And I didn't really intend to release that as a thing. Like I always was giving myself permission to be like, just finish the thing and you don't have to do anything with it. But I think once I got nominated for Best New Band by City Pages, I was just like, oh, okay, that's not what I wanted at all. Like it felt like a good idea to be like, just All right, you know what? Here it is. Who's still with me? And it did scare away kind of a lot of people, but I think the people who stayed, it was worth it because they realized the recording and the live show are different things by design, and it's kind of every single thing is a piece that could stand on its own, but it's also part of a grand thing that it fits in together. And when you like zoom out, they all kind of work together in weird ways, but just kind of also make sure everything can kind of stand alone as its own thing. So 1500 kind of was stemming from that spirit, but I realized I had a bunch of songs that I was recording as demos, and it's just like, all right, which ones am I gonna pick? And it just kind of made sense that, well, one, the flow of some of these songs actually seems to work pretty well, but like the songs that made the cut for this EP were all kind of like songs about journeys, so to speak. I figured, you know, we're recording in a literal van, so it just felt right to kind of arrive on this collection of songs, and leave a few out. That just where it's like either I feel like the song isn't written enough, or I just felt like I'll just do like it just didn't, you know, these felt right, and that's kind of going back to the original spirit of the project of just like, no, if it feels right, do it, even if it's a little weird or kind of out there. If it still feels like a completed thought, and if you feel like it's actually executing the point, and it has a certain character, and it, you know, it doesn't have to sound like it's got to be the best thing in the world. It's just like if it has its own character, where I go, you know, I don't think I've heard anything like this. It kind of, that's what makes the cutting room floor of just like, you know what, let's actually release this. Let's actually do it, you know.
A distinguishing feature of the record is that it begins and ends with Ouroboros, which is clever.
The snake is eating its own tail.
Exactly, yes. And Ouroboros begins in parentheses, and then we have the song outside of parentheses at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's give that opening track its due. How did you decide to begin with this track, which evokes the closing track and also really foregrounds Highway 61?
Right, and well, that song couldn't really figure out if it wanted to be one really long song or like, so I was already kind of like battling with that, and I felt like, oh, that's actually, that makes, it was like kind of like a happy accident of just like, well, if we're gonna do the Ouroboros metaphor, why don't we just kind of bookend it? And the van noise was just strictly from a process level of just like when you're mixing in headphones, like a lot of the vocal takes and a lot of like the, because I was also miking my electric guitar to kind of have in the background. There's just van noise. There just is. And I think on some tracks, there's like so many like voices kind of layered in that like it you can't really tell, but there were some things where it's just like, oh yeah, it's just in there. So like I kind of just decided to lean into it with like the Wolf Tower thing of like listening back. It's just like, oh, everything I recorded is so distorted. What am I gonna do? It's just like, distort it more. So it's just like, oh, everything's got van noise. It's in everything. It's just like, all right, well, just go record some more van noise. So I actually went back to all the locations I filmed at the video companion to Wolf Tower, and just took ambient recordings outside of all the locations I filmed at and all the locations I recorded at. So there's, you know, little ambient noise in South Minneapolis, but there's ambient noise and, you know, outside the hotel in Red Wing, there's ambient noise outside of Sugarloaf and Winona, but there's also like 61 North, and just kind of outside of the hotel room itself I recorded and filmed in, and just kind of
You returned to all
blended
of those
that
locations.
together, and it just kind of felt right. Of just like, well, this touring van is on its last legs. So I figured it's just like, well, let's celebrate its lifespan by like, you already kind of have half of an EP. Why don't we just finish? Why don't we just commit to the bit and just do an EP in your van? And it just kind of felt right to, since it was in the spirit of all the other stuff that THEYSELF has been doing, just kind of return to where it started. And kind of just, it's just like, so part of where this journey began is in this project as well.
That's very Ouroboros too, returning to
Exactly.
where you began. And there are multiple ways in which the record draws attention to the act of returning.
Yes. Yeah.
So, for example, in the full song Ouroboros, "Sold Your Soul to the Company" line, we have a character doing the same old thing that
Right.
Daddy did.
Right. Yeah.
So there it seems somewhat bleak, or there could be, it's not necessarily celebrated that the return, but then in and out we have there the return is returning to the breath, keep breathing in.
Yeah.
Those are just a couple of ways, one more life-affirming than the other, in which the record draws attention to cycles and return. Could you reflect a little bit on the various ways in which this record that begins and ends with Ouroboros draws attention to cycles and return?
I'm glad you brought up the cycles and return, because this is kind of the whole point of the record.
It could be called Ouroboros.
Yeah, it could be. And it just kind of felt, that's how I landed on this collection of songs, and I kind of felt like just knowing that, oh, I'm probably not going to be able to keep this van going, and just like, oh, but this van was here from the beginning. It was like, there was all these like themes of like, from the beginning. You're like, but where are we going to go? To the beginning. Like, it just, there was all this naturally occurring in my life at that point, that it just kind of felt right to use material that was already kind of touching on these things. And I don't like explaining my songs in this project, mainly just because I not to like do a full David Lynch and be like, no, I'm not going to explain anything. It's just more of like, I do think that kind of like tends to ruin it, because like like you mentioned certain themes being bleak, and I've talked to other people that have touched on the same themes, and it's just like, yeah, that was a really positive theme for me.
Yeah,
and for me, I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna let that be your positive theme, and I'm gonna let that be your positive theme, because I definitely have bleak and positive and negative themes and ideas of what this material means to me.
Yes.
Oh, but I don't want to like take that away from someone else. But as far as like process, and as far as what the songs mean thematically, you know, like as far as like my journeys with anxiety, like they just kind of seem so cyclical, of just like, I thought I was done with this, and then, you know, it's just like new things happen, and then you kind of return to like, oh, well, yeah, the things that used to set this off don't really bother me anymore, but now there's this new, you know, new thing that brings me back here, or you know, as far as like the theme of Ouroboros, of just like feeling, you know, like the rebellious teenager of just like, I'm not gonna do that, man. I'm not gonna be like everyone else in this town and like sold their soul, you know. And then you realize, like, by avoiding that, like, you're still very much your parents, and you're like very much, you know, falling into these lessons that, you know, the universe just kind of throws at you. Like, it's not like a, and it's just like, well, what am I supposed to do with this lesson? The universe is just kind of just like, I don't know, man. It's your lesson. Figure it out. Yeah, it's just kind of touching on those themes of just like, but I did the thing to make sure I wasn't going to end up there, and I'm still here. What does it mean? I don't know. It's your lesson. It's that's your that's your journey. You know. So that's like another reason I don't want to explain the songs too much, because I think, in a way, I would like overwrite them, and then I would peel them back and try to make them a little bit more mantric and a little bit more like, yes, this means a lot to me, but it might mean something completely different to someone else. And I've actually noticed that it has for certain people. You know, like some songs are like actually happy, and then somebody's like, oh man, that song just makes me anxious. And it's just like the same song has a completely different reaction. And to me, it's like that's the correct reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to clarify, it's purely the idea of selling one's soul that seems bleak to me. The song itself doesn't.
That's always a weird thing, because I think like I don't want to get into like Bob Dylan territory, but like eventually you do have to serve somebody. You know, like by trying to avoid giving your soul to something else or something, you know, like you eventually will give it to something you actually want to give it to. Like you still will give a part of yourself to something, even if you want to give it up willingly, you know. So I think in the process of trying to avoid selling one's soul or like giving it up against one's will, like going through that journey, you're still gonna have to do that.
This brings us back to the collaboration between the different parts, I think. Because if
and
there's a lack of communication between them, then that's when one might find one's survival part.
Right, like the inner child might be like, man, you sold out. Like, you used to be cool. and it's just like, and the survival mode is just like, I'm doing this because I love you. And then like, Precisely. And then your present self in the middle is just like, how did we get here? Why are we here? Why we don't need to be here? You know, so always kind of trying to have that, trying to keep that in check, not only like internally, but like with the people you're in your life too. It's just like, I feel like this is why everyone should make art. Just because like I think like the metaphors and the journeys associated with just doing anything, I think are really rewarding and enriching for everyone, and which is why this project kind of exists, of just like, you know, just keep doing the thing. Just keep chasing what gets you excited. Understand you'll have to make some compromises in finances or just, you know, physical limitations, or, you know, either of space or physical ability, or, you know, like there's always going to be a thing, but like you should always stop and look around and be like, wait, is this still fun? Am I still having a good time? Like Ferris Bueller, like life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to take a look around every once in a while, you might miss it. But it's definitely kind of making sure all three of those people are happy in that compromise. Because there is always going to be something where it's just like the inner child is going to be like, but I wanted flames. And it's just like, all right, we went. You don't have money for flames. Like, you know, like there's always going to be that. There's always going to be that, but you just kind of have to find a way to make sure the project is a complete sentence and kind of checks all those boxes. And that's why a lot of the stuff that THEYSELF actually releases gets released. Because like, a lot of it is on the lo-fi side, but it ends up having a character that it's just like, well, you know what, I feel like I learned a lot from doing this, and I feel like there is a certain character, and I feel like considering this kind of started out as like a stage performance thing, that you're like witnessing someone, like the magician, kind of figure out their trick live on stage. It just kind of seemed fitting to be like, I feel like this is part of the spirit of what this thing is. So I decided there were so many natural themes of just like, wow, we've really come a long way, but we're also coming right back to all these other things.
Physically, literally back at the hotel room.
Yeah.
Where the first record was created. What do we do now? How do we move on to the next thing? Well, let's go back to the
let's go back to that thing. And but also, like, you know, like make sure, because I feel like all three of the people that I've created in my head have a different view of the future and the past.
Okay.
You know, your inner child definitely views the past and views what they want to do in the future a lot different than your survival self views the future and views the past. And I think sometimes like the discord between these people can create anxiety. Like, you know, if you're too much in the future of just like, wow, we're going to do this, you're never going to do anything. But if you're too much in the past of just like, oh, God, I'm so embarrassed by that. Why did I do that? Can we just delete it from the internet forever? You know, like if you're also never going to do anything because you're going to be so focused on like, all right, let's just re-record it. We're going to re-record the, you know, and that might be fun. You know, if that's like a project that like actually feels fun to you, do it. I'm not going to tell you to not do that.
Yeah.
But like only do it if that's what is scratching the itch. Don't feel like you need to do it because like, oh, I need to. You don't need to go full George Lucas, and it's just like, we need to add better CGI to all my old stuff. It's just like, if it feels right to you and it feels like it's on track with your journey, keep doing it.